Parker, have you ever been accused by your loved ones or significant others that you were, a little bit selfish?
Oh, 100%. Oh, I mean, ex-girlfriends for sure. So
not current girlfriends though.
Current girlfriend, no. Current
she
girlfriend.
doesn't. So you've like softened up over the years, or
Probably.
She just hasn't seen it yet.
Well, I win a lot less races than I did.
Or are you
when
full
I
of
was
it? Are you just
narcissistic?
I think you're full of. I'm gonna call Shan right now.
Bro, it is probably shit. We got a call right this second. Get the actual answer. Hey, we're live. This is the Money Lap Podcast. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon, Cassill. Go check out themoneylap.com for our newsletter. It comes to your inbox 3 times a week with the cool stuff in motorsports. We got a big show. Landon, before we jump into it, just real quick, give everyone sort of a synopsis of what they can expect on this episode. We're going to talk heavy NASCAR. So for you Formula One fans and all racing, just know it's going to be heavy NASCAR because it is the NASCAR Championship finale across all 3 series. So, of course, we'll dive into that a bit. We will talk a little Formula One and some even supercars from Australia. And then we have a Q&A from some of your questions from YouTube and the internets that we will dive into at the end of this episode. But, Landon, as always, we start with the PR lap. We get to talk about ourselves.
I love that part. No, you love that part. I'm okay with the part. You're the one that created the PR lap because you're like, man, I just really want to talk about myself.
Yeah, well, hold on. You did just have an interview with Jeff Gluck's 12 Questions, which is you're always the last one of the year. And
I know.
In it, you said what's a great skill race car drivers need, and you said is narcissism a skill? So I'm just saying this fits perfectly in line.
The best part about Jeff Gluck's. So Jeff Gluck's 12 Questions is a podcast as well, and that's my preferred way to consume that content. Amazing franchise of Jeff's that he's had for more than a decade, and for more than a decade, I have been the last driver to do 12 questions of every season. And then at the beginning of the next season, I help Jeff craft the questions for the following season. So I kind of have a little bit of a mainstay in the 12 Questions franchise, so it's a lot of fun. So one of the questions was what is a key skill or most important skill of a race car driver to possess, and the first thing that came to my mind was narcissism. So
which makes
is that
PR
a skill
lap.
Is
yeah
it?
Well, I think it is. I think it is. No, I'm gonna go on your side with this because to me the best race car drivers in the world are incredibly selfish normally.
Yeah, I think that's a product of just ultra high performing competitive. I mean, think about the most successful CEOs, athletes, business owners, whatever, successful people, business success. I'm not. I mean, it's what am I trying to say? I'm not trying to say that is at what everything life isn't just about business success and athletic success, but I'm just pointing out that the most high performing people in this world tend to have some level of narcissism or selfishness or whatever, one track mind. So yeah, think of your favorite race car drivers and I could
love themselves.
I could think of a few, Kyle Busch, Tony Stewart. I mean, those guys get a little self-love there.
They just love themselves. You know what? It is what it is. If you're gonna do something where you're gonna be in the public eye, at least you got to love yourself a little bit because you're gonna get some rocks thrown your way.
Parker, have you ever been accused by your loved ones or significant others that you were, a little bit selfish?
Oh, 100%. Oh, I mean, ex-girlfriends for sure. So
not current girlfriends though.
Current girlfriend, no. Current
she
girlfriend.
So you've like softened up over the years, or
Probably.
She just hasn't seen it yet?
Well, I win a lot less races than I did.
Or are you full of
it?
Are you just
narcissistic?
I think you're full of I'm gonna call Shan right now.
Bro, it is probably shit. We got a call right this second. Get the actual answer.
All right, we're back in the money lap. I just got off the phone with Shan. She said it's a bunch of baloney. He's the most selfish person she's ever met. By the way, Mrs. Cassill said the same thing. So
true. The evidence is out there. Speaking of myself and ourselves, before we dive further in the PR lap, just a quick announcement. Earlier today, I recorded an interview / discussion with Will Buxton, the F1 journalist. You might know him from Drive to Survive. Also, as the F1 TV host, he was the reporter on Speed Channel and on NBC Sports for Formula One. It was an awesome discussion, diving into track limits and debating that. He even he assessed some drivers currently in Formula One right now, including Logan Sargent, the American, and had some really strong opinions. So go check that one out as well. It's a special episode, but let's dive into this one, our normal Money Lap podcast episode here.
Yeah.
And we start with the reviews. We did get a new Apple review, and I love this one. It's from Next Year Cubs 16, who said, is now my go-to motorsports podcast, 5 stars. The Money Lap has become my go-to podcast for motorsports. It covers various series, but is a bit NASCAR heavy, which suits my interest to a T. Great technical information from a couple of drivers, plus commentary and inside information as well. It is concise and to the point, yet entertaining and informative. That's one of my favorite reviews. Speaking of narcissism.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Do you want to read the Spotify ones?
I love a good, thoughtful review. Especially when there's actual, like, really specific feedback from our discussions, because that just tells me that you're listening as well. So
I like that.
Wes Hurd on Spotify, actually, speaking of, Wes Hurd on Spotify said really good comments on paid drivers versus regular drivers. So thank you for that. Yeah, and I appreciate a comment like that, because I feel like sometimes we step outside the box or challenge the traditional thinking when it comes to paid drivers and things like that, because it's so easy to just discount paid drivers nowadays. And my thought on it right now is just suck it up. Maybe you should be a paid driver somehow.
You should want to be one.
You should want to be a paid driver. Great episode, helps me keep up to date with all motorsports. This one's from Christopher, and I know I'm a week late, but thank you, Parker, for talking to me on Saturday at Homestead. Nice. Oh, you're always talking about people that recognize you. Christopher was the kid who asked about iRacing.
I love that.
And we're getting so much love on the streets.
At Martinsville, I kid you not, maybe tens of people. Tens of people said they love the Money Lap.
We're getting so much love from the street on the Money Lap. Daniel Blackstone said, great podcast, love the deep dives. Otherwise, it's like I'm listening to the same news reported by every other racing podcast. The deep dive is a key to attracting more listeners. Thank you, Daniel. That's what we want to do here. We want to actually talk about these subjects, not just react. I mean, it's hard not to be a reaction studio when there's legitimate current events happening, and we are going to react to them, but we like to try to react to these current events with our thoughtful experience, our spin on them. So appreciate the notice there, Daniel. We'll try to keep it up. We'll try to keep things as deep as we can without running out of time, because I'm hungry.
Definitely.
Tonight.
We do have a lot.
We're not going to run out of time.
But we're not going to run out of time. Speaking of YouTube, we will dive into those comments and questions on the YouTube, but we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers there. So please go subscribe to our YouTube, The Money Lap. And we've been cutting up clips and putting more content there. And, one day it might even be special content. Even, I don't know, we might have something really cool to talk about in the next couple of days / next week involving YouTube. So stay tuned. I raced Martinsville this past weekend, and really to sum it up, it was easy, Landon. I hit everything but the lottery and still finished 10th. Hit the lower control arm off the car, finished 10th. It was just one of those races where everything goes wrong, from the beginning of being maybe about a 13th place car to, having no drive off, to pitting and not taking tires but trying to work on it, giving up our track position, getting the front destroyed, then going fighting all the way back, going laps down, coming all the way back to lead lap, then immediately getting the right front knocked in, going 3 laps down after cutting the right front tire, then getting all the way back in the lead lap, and on the last restart, getting into the top 10, and the huge wreck at the end, got clipped, spun, and destroyed on the front stretch, and still finished 10th. So it was a wild affair. If you were on my social media, you'll see there was a funny moment from my owner where he wanted to give each crew member a $1,000 bonus if we got to the top 10. We got there. So you're welcome, boys.
Nice. In points?
Well, top 10 in that race.
In
So
Martinsville. Okay.
yeah. So the point situation, and I should just say, hey, it was a team effort this past weekend. I mean, every one of my crew guys, was cutting pieces off this car. This thing had no business finishing the top 10, and we found a way to make it happen. So cool to do in front of our owner, Scott. We saw our team rally up and take a bad day and turn it into a positive. So you got to do that sometimes. It's our 18th top 10 of the year. So when we get another one this coming weekend, we'll be just short of 20, which is a solid year. So
that's a really good year.
And speaking of points, we're in a tight battle. We're in 8th, but it's tight from about 6th to 10th. Probably spread about 25 points, 28. Not super tight, but there's tight portions in there. It's tight for us from above 10th. So we've got to go figure it out. I want to finish 6th. I did the math. It pays about double to finish 6th versus 10th for me in my compensation for the year. So
for that particular bonus, or your entire year's compensation is double?
That particular bonus. But okay. The year-end portion is a big portion of our compensation for the year. So we got to go get it done.
Yeah. So what's the path? You need a little bit of attrition in Phoenix and then a top 5.
Probably a little bit of attrition.
I mean, to get 20 points on 6th, you're going to need
take
something.
A lot. It's going to take a lot.
Yeah.
You're going to need a little help, that sort of thing. I think for us, it just needs to be, we got to be in the top 7 in stages, top 8.
So talk to me about Phoenix then.
Get a top 5. What about it?
I was in the sim. I was in the sim this week for Phoenix, actually, for Hendrick.
Yes.
Which is cool. Getting their cars ready for the championship race, and which is an honor because they have two, couple cars racing for a championship. So what are your thoughts? I mean,
so I was in the sim on Tuesday. What's my attack on this? So my plan. So I did lots of prep back in the spring for Phoenix. I had not been there in 10 years and thankfully took great notes. And then was able to relate those notes to real life. And when I went there and practice, I had just the notes aligned perfectly in the things I worked on, especially turns 3 and 4, which you helped me with, actually, if you remember correctly, where I really struggled there in terms of just understanding how to attack that corner and where the min speed point was. And ever since figuring that out, it was like a light bulb went off. And so what I did in the sim this time was, we didn't do nearly as much as I did in the spring, but what I did is look at the notes and then try to apply those notes and then work just a little bit of things I found in real life. And sure enough, they all clicked. And so over the course of a couple hours, felt like, all right, that's what I know the plan of attack there. And I know what we need from our race car in terms of practice adjustments into qualifying in the race. So we have a pretty good plan. I'd say one of our best plans of the year in that sense. So we'll see if it all comes to fruition, but it's not anything super special as opposed to really building on what we did in the spring and what I felt like really worked for me. So we'll see if that plays off.
That's a huge one for me. That's very finicky. And when you figure it out, I think you can, it can be almost automatic. Phoenix is interesting for me because I feel like I have a specific way that I drive that track that's different, that requires a little bit different setup. But I actually think that, I have a little secret sauce as long as I can get my car set up the way to fit my driving style there. So when I have a few instances in my career where I've had a car that was really well set up for my driving style for Phoenix, and I've run really, really well there. One of specifically really my most recent NASCAR race, which was a year ago in the 10 car at Kaulig, had a solid top 5 car there. And that car was uniquely set up for my driving style going into that race. In the sim, it's difficult because I feel like I don't run as well with like your driving style or AJ Allmendinger's driving style or even William Byron and Kyle Larson's driving style is a little bit different than mine. So I find myself, having to adapt to what they're doing to be able to replicate what they need, that's fine. I mean, that's the job for what I'm doing there right now. But it is interesting the way I drive that place. And a lot of it has to do with just braking. I'm not a big peak brake pressure guy. So you don't see that like spike in the brake pressure and the splitter hitting the ground. And that maximum tire squish at initial corner entry, but where if when I have a team that sets the car up around that driving style, we actually get the front end a lot lower for me. And because the track is so flat, the splitter stays a lot lower all the way around the track. And I feel like I benefit from that. Every time I've had a car set up like that at Phoenix, I've run exceptionally well. So it's kind of an interesting. It's not ever something that teams see in the simulation. I've had every time I've been able to execute that with a team, I've had to really convince the crew chief to, really set the car up lower in real life than what the simulation says that it can handle. Because, the simulation will say that it's going to be, a quarter of an inch into the ground. But my driving style kind of corrects that. And the front end of the car will be at the right height. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting way that I get around the place.
That is fascinating. And I think it goes to a lot of what people don't often realize is, there's the correct setup and that sort of thing, but there's also the correct setup for your driver. And there is places where a driver can make a big difference in you understanding that, knowing how you drive it, and being able to relay to a team, this is how it needs to be set up, right? I think that's a really powerful thing when you have that and you know that and you have that confidence. So I feel that for sure. That's awesome. I don't know if I have that confidence there, but you did help me out big time. So I do appreciate that.
Well, one thing that I am confident about, Parker, is that SpoilerDiecast.com is one of the largest inventories in the industry. They have over 800 unique products currently in stock, including diecast and apparel offerings for NASCAR, dirt sprint cars, IndyCar, and F1. And with their pre-order system in place, you can be sure to get your hands on the latest diecast releases without the long wait. What's even better? If you spend $50 or more at SpoilerDiecast.com right now, they still have a few Landon Cassill signed diecast left, but I'm going to just have to almost stop saying that because I think they're almost gone. So just in case they don't, use promo code MONEYLAP, get free shipping, 5% off all orders. Don't wait. Head to SpoilerDiecast.com today and get your racing fix before the season's over.
Yes. SpoilerDiecast.com.
I don't know what the season... I don't know what the season being over has to do with having to shop for a diecast, but it's about time to do a Christmas special.
That's what I was gonna say. It's perfect timing for that. So you should.
It's Christmas season in the Cassill house. We start Christmas in November.
My girlfriend most definitely will have done that as well. So Halloween's her favorite, but now it's Christmas time. I love Thanksgiving, but that's because my favorite holiday involves drinking and eating a lot. So let's jump into the biggest topics from around the motorsports world. And we did say this is going to be a bit NASCAR heavy because it is the final weekend of NASCAR. But off of Martinsville, there was plenty to talk about, starting with the Xfinity Series. Yes, I talked about my race, but that really wasn't the story, Landon. The story was another year, another two teammates clash in the final laps of the race between at the end for, one for drivers to go on to the championship four. Last year, it was the Gibbs teammates of Ty Gibbs and Brandon Jones. This year, it was the RCR teammates of Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill. There's a lot of discussions. You had a pretty big tweet about this. Where do we want to start with this one?
I mean, do you want to just go right to that final restart and talk about it? I mean, or what?
Yeah.
What did you think there?
Well, so obviously I was in the race, didn't see any of it, but I knew sitting under the red flag there that was about 30 minutes long what the situation was. I assumed the 21 could possibly be in on points. Obviously, we all knew the 2 had to win, right? I think, when you dissect it now, maybe there's some things that RCR as an entity could have done to put themselves in the best position there, right? Knowing that, but I think they weren't in a great position because both cars basically were in a position where most likely at least to control their destiny, especially the 21, because the 00 was making up spots. They had to make up spots. They had to win, right? So you're kind of you're in a tough spot to say, hey, you got to work together.
Both of them did.
Right. Yeah. So I think that was tough. What happened after that personally, the 2 car, Sheldon, I feel like he was almost really nice. I felt like down
he was
into
way
turn
too
1
nice.
on the final lap, turn 1, Ty Gibbs showed what you can do to Brendan Jones, and that is dump
He
them
should
into the
just
wall,
shipped him.
cause a caution. Yeah, cause a caution and move on. But he didn't, and he tried to race it cleanly and was bit for that. And that's where I just I didn't understand all the fervor around his decision making, when to me it was the nicest choice possible.
Yeah, and I don't I was kind of surprised that the 2 didn't choose behind the 21 on that restart. That tells me that the 2 actually wanted to win it fair and square. And the 21 on that restart didn't want to give the 2 a chance. He just drove straight up the racetrack, try to take his line away. Did the 2 had fresher tires?
That I don't know. I don't know that.
I for some reason I thought there was a tire difference, but either way, I mean the 2 is faster, obviously, but they took the green flag, and the 21 just ran the 2 up the racetrack. Didn't even want to give him a chance. And he just raced him horribly. And I think the 2 was generous, and the 21 was throwing these mad blocks. I mean, you're gonna get punted when you block and chop the corner the way he did. It was like they were funhouse go-kart racing. And the final lap, the things that you didn't see right off the bat, that after watching it a few times, and rehashing it, one thing you got to notice is that the 21 turned down into the 2 so hard into turn 3 that you can see where it bent his splitter down.
Yeah,
his splitter was on the ground going into turn 3. So, yeah, I mean, Sheldon bombed it into the corner, probably overdrove it, but he had no angle. He had been run down the racetrack. He got his, right front splitter caved down. It's on the ground. He was shoving up the racetrack so hard. What looked like a brake check was really a brake check. And he had to do it for a couple reasons. I think, just to make the corner he needed to get the car to turn a little bit, he had to brake check. But I also think it was a tactical move. I think that it was smart to try to almost check the field up behind him and get that hit from the bumper so that he can drive off the corner and have the space to drive off the corner. I just think that he, maybe it was a slight error because there was some room there for the 7 to fill a gap when he made the brake check. So he didn't just brake check. He was trying to brake check both lanes, or maybe, just hoping it was a single file lane of cars behind him, but it wasn't. The 7 was able to fill the gap and win the race. So that was the unfortunate part for Sheldon. Austin, my tweet said that the 21 should have let the 2 win. I think I kind of retract that, because that's definitely an armchair quarterback. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. How do you really know? I mean, he was close enough on points that I don't blame him for just thinking that he needs to win the race himself. But it still was just, I don't know. It was just kind of crappy driving, in my opinion, and then crappy attitude after the fact.
Yeah, I think the attitude, obviously,
and I like Austin. I'm a fan of Austin's, but I just didn't think that was great. And then the whole stuff with RCR after the fact was laughable, in my opinion. Pretty tacky.
So obviously, I work closely with RCR and these drivers, and have through the season. And I have immense amount of respect for Sheldon and an immense amount of respect for Austin Hill. And I'd say my respect for Austin Hill has gone far higher this year than it was prior to the season. And I don't feel, I don't think I need to hide that. He knew that. And I think, I just definitely have a different viewpoint of his driving ability as I've watched him this year. But I think the key points that you point out that not a lot of people saw there was the body slam down the backstretch that eventually damaged the 2 car and forced him in a position where he was going to drive in deep. There's a lot of that speedy dry stuff down. The track was like slick as well, because all the oil and everything had been laid down during the red flag when 92 cars wrecked. And so, the reaction afterwards to me was a little disappointing, especially as you put it from the, the organizational side, as to, at the end of the day, if you're a driver, which you and I are, and have driven for different organizations, you want to know your organization at least has your back, right? Like the best situations I've been in are you win and lose as a team, but we've got your back, right? If you do what it takes to win. And I just think it's disappointing when organizations don't support a driver when, their goal was trying to do what everyone's there to do, which is win, right? And I find that can be a tough thing, and it's just overall disappointing. I do know Denny Hamlin, and many asked, what was the RCR competition meeting like? Well, I can tell you from inside being there, I was the only driver. So there was nothing that happened. So you can all move on.
Nobody showed up, huh?
Nobody showed up. I was the only driver.
Yeah, and I'm glad that RCR Petree apologized on NASCAR Race Hub. Felt like he could have handled it better. I don't know if Richard has said anything, because he had some pretty strong words for Sheldon. Said that he was the dumbest driver he's ever had. And that's just, it's heat of the moment, and he's Richard Childress. I guess he could say whatever he wants. He's got a pretty good organization over there in terms of competition. But at that part, those comments and that reaction is disappointing for what you said, right? Like the organization should have their drivers back. And, you look at a new driver going in there, Jesse Love. I mean, I don't know if those comments, no matter what you think of Sheldon Creed, I don't think hearing those comments from your future team owner is going to make you feel really great about where you're headed.
That's tough.
And it is tough. And you look at, I also look at it from the perspective of like, Sheldon is a really good driver, and he's is an extremely capable driver. I think he's going to go places, but he also, he brought funding to get in that car. That's how that business works at that level. His family was a big part of putting that deal together, to my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong, but most of those Xfinity rides have to have some kind of financial backing to get the car fielded.
Mm-hmm.
And, for Childress to sort of take their money and then just make those comments on their way out, I would imagine that it's one of those moments in life where I do think that Richard is a person of somewhat decent integrity, and he probably wishes he wouldn't have said that.
That's tough. And I think in this case, to your point, emotions are high, right? Everyone's seen it for the first time there. We drivers, right? We have to apologize sometimes for things we say on the radio, for stuff we do in the car, right? I guess it's no different. Obviously, you put it out there that Andy Petree apologized on NASCAR Race Hub and said we should have handled it better I should have handled it better than I did after the race. His other quote was, they bent the bumper bar on Sheldon's car going into turn 3. When he got there, he couldn't turn. So, admitting when cooler heads have prevailed later on, right? That's the right thing. But yeah, it's unfortunate. And hey, it shows you how invested everyone is in the results of these races. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we just feel like cars going in circles. That is not the case. So there's a lot of people putting a lot of effort into trying to make these cars go fast and to beat each other. Trust me. Yep. You and I have both sat in these meetings and seen sometimes it boggles my mind, the amount of people that have to put together these race cars to go and try and beat each other. And then you do that over 30, 20 some odd cars at that level. And you're like, this is a pretty big endeavor.
Yeah. I mean, it is that time of season too, where it just, if you have something to say, it's time to say it.
Oh man. Well, let's move into the Cup Series. It was a really compelling Cup Series race at Martinsville. Definitely the best short track race of the NextGen era. And one of the more compelling Martinsville races, for a lot of reasons, being the playoffs and the fight to get into the championship. But also, there was a little bit of passing. There was a lot of rubber that laid down. And I think one thing that hasn't been discussed enough is that it was an unseasonably 81 plus degrees at Martinsville here in October 30th or October, late October. So I think that helped
has
a ton.
Seemed to make the biggest difference.
It does, and it helped
makes
the
biggest difference at Martinsville.
It does. It's the most temperature-dependent racetrack on the planet, in my opinion, or at least in terms of what kind of racing you get. No, I'm saying what type of racing. I
disagree with that, but in terms of rubber laying down, for sure. Oh,
well, what would you
it's too. It's two completely different racetracks.
Thank you.
In
That's what I was
terms of
trying to
how
say.
it takes rubber. It is two completely different racetracks in terms of how it takes rubber, depending on temperature. You can have a 55 degree or 60 degree fall day. The track will take no rubber. It is
All around the
completely
bottom.
white because of the concrete the whole time. And you run around the bottom, and the only way to pass is to boot someone out of the way. Or you have what you had on Sunday, and the sun beats down on the track. It's 80 degrees, and there's just enough heat that it keeps the rubber on, like the rubber adheres to the track. That's it's like as simple as that. If the track is cold, the rubber doesn't get hot enough, and the track doesn't get hot enough that the rubber wears off and it balls up and it just spits it up the racetrack. And that's where we have marbles. But when it's hot, the rubber gets hot, the tire gets hot, the racetrack gets hot, and just like glue or I'm trying to think of something that's sticky, right? they will stick together as long as there's heat there. And it'll stay sticked, and that's where stuck to the track, and that's where the track gets black. And then where the track gets black, it gets slick because it's greasy on the rubber, and there's, it's like there's oil in the tire material and grease in the tire material, whatever it is. And the rubber on rubber does not make grip. Some people think it does, but it doesn't. And so that's when the groove opens up, and you have a completely different racetrack than if it's just a one-lane track. The reason, for whatever reason, the reason that's so much more sensitive now than it's been earlier in my career is there's something about the Goodyear tire that we've been racing on. And I know we always talk about different tire compounds, but there's something about just the tire in general, the rubber in general, the makeup of the rubber in general nowadays doesn't what am I trying to say? I'm totally making something up here.
It doesn't adhere to the racetrack the same way. I know what you're saying. You're saying
it has
like
how like oil. You know how cooking, when you cook with oil, like different oils have a different smoke point, right? So
yes.
Olive oil might be 350 degrees, and avocado oil might be 400 degrees or whatever. So it's like the rubber that Goodyear is using to make the tires nowadays has a much higher stick point. Right, for the rubber to wear off the tire and stick to the track. The tire has to be really hot to build up rubber and stick to the racetrack.
And the track has to be hot. No, and I think you're 100% onto something. You're 100% onto it, and you know that this occurred. What was it, 10 years ago, or a little longer than that, maybe 13 or 14 years ago, when they had to change the process from natural rubbers to synthetic rubbers or something. And this has been that discussion for a long time. So you're right. There was a change.
Yep.
Yeah. So
something in the rubber.
Well, and it's fascinating because that's the reason I brought it up, and why you did a great job describing what happened. It creates an entirely different type of racing that the next gen car just hasn't had there, because the next gen car has so much tire and creates so much grip, and then on top of that doesn't have a ton of horsepower to spin the tires, so the tires don't wear out that much. And then lastly, there's you can downshift so that anytime you make a mistake, it's really easy to recover from mistakes. So the racing there has been really tough. Was it vastly different this time? No. Listening to some of the drivers, they didn't think it was vastly different. But from the outside, there was definitely a couple more comers and goers. There was definitely, at least the rubber laying down made different line choices work. You could run the outside like the 12 car Blaney did to make passes, which just was not the case in any of the previous ones. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really cool. There was an unfortunate deal where before the race, I was pit reporting this weekend. One of the teams told me, yeah, we can run 2,000 laps on the left side tires before they wear out. So that's not ideal in terms of racing. In the 4 team of Kevin Harvick, I believe went half of the race on the left side tires from a tweet from Rodney Childers. So yeah, that wasn't great.
But there's just no. I don't. What? Go ahead.
Well, to your point about rubber, the pace car broke down this past weekend, and I did tweet about the rubber on my shoes from walking across the track. It broke down because it picked up so much rubber on the tires, and it got through rubber and like into the wiring of the car and made the car stop.
Wow!
So there was a lot of rubber being laid down.
It's very interesting. the tire journey, the tire conversation is an interesting one. The dynamics there with NASCAR and the tire in Goodyear, is interesting because Goodyear is a sole supplier, right? And their brand, it's a touchy subject, really, because Goodyear is in NASCAR for branding and marketing, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't, what we want as drivers and teams is not like is not necessarily the most marketable thing for Goodyear as a tire company trying to sell to consumers. And what I mean by that is we want a tire that wears out and fails almost over the course of its life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to talk about that. And I think that Goodyear obviously wants to provide a great racing tire, but if you're a tire company trying to sell tires to a retail consumer, you're not necessarily want your lead marketing campaign to be using your product and watching it fail.
Yep.
Right? So there's kind of a weird incentives there. And then of course, there's the failure in terms of tire degradation, right? Over the course we call that tire fall off and the tire wear. But so you don't want to make this tire that's like wearing a lot. I mean, that's not great marketing. And then also, you sure as hell don't want the tire to have a catastrophic failure, right?
Yep.
Because we've all seen over the years what happens when a tire has a catastrophic failure. Car hits the wall, driver gets out, gets interviewed. What do they say? The tire book. The tires suck. Goodyear bought a crappy tire or brought a crappy tire. So we're constantly in this I think this difficult dynamic in our sport where the drivers and the teams want one thing and want this what it takes to make a good and competitive stock car racing tire. The company that makes the tires and the whole reason they're in the sport to brand themselves as a quality, reliable tire for customers or for retail consumers. They would much rather just build a tire that'll last forever, right?
Yep. Denny Hamlin said about the driver council basically going to Goodyear and being like, "Look, you build us a softer tire and it blows, we'll back you. Don't worry." Which I think is a nice sentiment. But here's the problem. That. Well, hold on. Here's the thing.
I appreciate that, Denny, and I hope he said that. But I don't believe you. So, and neither would Goodyear.
My point being that's kind of it's a nice sentiment, but guess what? That's not no multi-billion-dollar company is gonna be like, yeah, we'll take you at your word. It's just not gonna happen. It's an interesting discussion, and we didn't really plan this on this pod, so we're just gonna go on a tangent here for a second. Pirelli in Formula One had that issue where they came in and they created tires that people wanted, which wore out and required a ton of pit stops and that sort of thing. But then it started to look so ridiculous that they were like, hey, we have to change this because it makes Pirelli tires look awful. So
that's the point. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to your point, it's an issue, which is why last year on my In the Wall show I did on YouTube, I actually did a bit of a rant where I basically went into the idea that should racing series just create their own tires? You already sell them to the teams. You already sell them for an astronomical price per whatever. Why are we not making our own tires? If you want the tires you want, go make them.
Maybe, but I mean, it's okay. So then the question is, how much? What type of racing are you gaining or giving up in replace of?
Well, it's marketing.
Huge title sponsorship, right?
Yeah, the big thing you lose is Goodyear spends what $30 million a year in ads and that sort of thing.
Right. So can you gain that back just by being able to make a better, what we think is a better tire, right? Because I'm just saying, I'm not even going to go out and say, I mean, I've driven all kinds of racing tires in my career, mostly on stock cars. I know what I like as a driver, as a racing tire, but I'm not saying that I know everything. And so you're going to give up $30 million a year in corporate ad spend in the industry, across the industry, just to appease drivers who are like, oh, I want them to be really grippy when they're new and fall off over the course of a long run, and that's going to be better racing. Trust me.
Well, my question, here's my question: Could you make your own tires, not brand them by any sort of tire manufacturer, but allow all tire manufacturers to advertise in the sport on the cars?
Oh, and make up for it.
it would make up for it. Could you allow them all to advertise so there's no exclusivity?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting thought.
Hey,
You could
you know
even
what?
let them.
Go ahead.
I don't. Yeah, I mean that's definitely an interesting thought. I guess it's just interesting to think that a tire company would sponsor the sport but not be on the tire.
Yeah, you never know.
There's
Just
just
crazier things happen. Let's, if you're a fan out there listening to this and you have an opinion on tires, please let us know. Write to us at something@themoneylap.com or just respond or write to us on social media. Yeah, we just did it. If you like tires. Just to quickly run through some of the bigger topics from this past weekend. Obviously, Denny Hamlin missed out. We had him tabbed to be in the Championship 4, and we're going to go through our Championship 4 picks here in a little bit and all the things we got wrong. But it's always his year till it isn't, and it is now not Denny Hamlin's year anymore. In true number 11 Denny Hamlin fashion, they had an excellent day. Won stage 1, finished second in stage 2, third in stage 3. But the problem was the 12 car of Ryan Blaney was just better. And maybe the 11 car was the second best car in the field, but they just got beat by one car essentially between them and making the Championship 4. And I had to do the post-race interview with Denny, and I legitimately felt bad because I'm like, once again, this guy's 51 career wins. At 42 years old, he's going to most likely go down as the best ever to not win a championship unless he can change this. And once again, he gets it taken away. That just, I don't know. It just seemed like he did everything right performance-wise, just still couldn't make it happen.
It's what's unfortunate for him, and I was a Denny Hamlin fan this year. Obviously, I picked him to win the championship. Although I do want to run the tape back because I believe that I picked William Byron to win the championship way earlier this year on this podcast before we even released the podcast. So I think this was one of our trial episodes. Didn't I call William Byron to win the championship?
You might have.
So we need to get producer Josh on that and find the clip. But anyways, I of all the years as well for Denny, because he's made the Final Four, the Championship 4, and had opportunities, right? This was the year that he just seemed to be on it, right?
Yep.
And to not get himself there is heartbreaking. And, kind of similar. I mean, it's almost similar to your situation at the Roval, where it's just like, it is a Cup Series, and in the Cup Series, you have to win in these scenarios. But I still want to say, like, what more was he supposed to do in this scenario?
Yep.
I mean, run top 5 all day. It's Martinsville.
Qualifying the top
Ryan
5,
Blaney is
top
good,
5.
and Ryan Blaney is driving the best of his career right now. But if you told me where Denny Hamlin was going to run in Martinsville, and then gave me odds on whether he transferred or not, I would not have bet that Ryan Blaney was going to outrun Denny Hamlin like that at Martinsville.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
all respect to Blaney and how he's running.
Yeah, he's on, and Ryan Blaney is on an absolute heater right now. There's no doubt about it. The guy is, since they got the playoffs, has just been on it. And, in the summer months wasn't doing great, at least finishes wise, but since they got in the playoffs, has just lit it up. And that was one of the finest drives he's had in all of NASCAR, in his career, I believe. Watching that race the other day, he was just calm, cool, collected, and continually just made the right moves, found lanes to make passes when others didn't, and executed at a super high level, and had a fast car, but drove it to perfection. So you got to give him credit where credit's due. And to your point, it's like when I talked about the Roval for us in the Xfinity series, it was like we had a really, really good day. We needed an excellent day. Denny Hamlin had an excellent day. He needed a perfect day. It's like he needed to win. Yeah. It's like, he literally came in there, 17 points below or whatever, and just needed to win. That's the end of it. So Ford wins with Ryan Blaney. They almost won with Aric Almirola, who announced that he's retiring for full-time Cup competition at the end of the year. He had a great drive, and this week they announced the new Ford Mustang for next year, and it looks kind of mean. Did you see the photos yet?
Yeah, I think it looks really good.
Yeah, it looks kind of mean. I like it. There'll be another manufacturer with a new car next year as well. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Yeah, I may have got to see it. I don't know. Fontana is finally under destruction. There was someone who tweeted that out today. If you want to go see those, maybe we'll link them. We'll put that link in our show description. Producer Josh can help us out there, which would be nice. And then our favorite conversation, by the way, Charter Talk. It was announced this week, or at least not announced, but it was put out there that NASCAR will not repossess the 51 Charter from Rick Ware Racing, as I think it's in the bottom three consecutive years now, so they had the option to do that. But they, with the RFK Alliance, they have their use of full A motors, and now signing Justin Haley, they basically consider that a commitment to performance improvement. So they are safe for now with their charter, which is interesting. We haven't really seen that publicly discussed until I believe now.
I think I'm going to kind of side with the team owners on this one and say that I think the whole bottom three deal is a silly rule to begin with. I think it defeats the purpose of having a closed charter environment. I think that if you want to have a way to kick a team out because if you feel like they're milking the system, then just do it, and have it written into the bylaws or the agreement that way, or maybe the charter owners can all agree to kick someone out. I don't know. But the whole bottom three thing is just
get out.
Yeah, it's stupid because it's like it's a really clear rule, right? Or it's a really simple and clear rule. You can't finish in the bottom three for 3 years in a row. Mm-hmm. Then we might get rid of you. And it's just like, well, don't, or do, or don't. I don't care. Like which one is it? Right. So I think it's silly, and I'm glad that they're not taking away their charter because I think Rick Ware Racing, I think it's really freaking hard to build a competitive race team. Mm-hmm. And Rick Ware, that guy is scrappy. He's a racer. He's done very well for himself, but he doesn't have a billion-dollar enterprise to back himself up. He's had to, every penny that's in that place, he's had to either find it himself or scrap for it or the sponsorship. And it's so you're not just gonna all of a sudden, compete in the top 20 or in the top 25, even in the Cup Series. It's just really hard to do. And so he's made it farther than I think anybody gave him credit for. He's obviously signed Justin Haley as RFK Alliance, Roush Yates engines next year. So it doesn't bother me that he's been in the bottom three for 3 years. I think it's a respectable organization, and I think it's a dumb rule.
I think it's almost antiquated in the current NextGen situation in that, era. Well, you had, 5 years ago, you had cars that were running on $3.5 million starting parking, essentially, right? Right now, the bottom car in the NASCAR Cup Series is damn near probably 10 million, 8 to 10 million, somewhere in there, right? And
that is a much more mature way of saying what I said. Because you know what? Let's go back to when the charter agreement was created. And the charter agreement was created in a time, like you said, when there were several teams and organizations that were either milking the system or, we were fresh out of a time period where start and park. I mean, my career was started on start and parks. I know the financials around that. Those start and park teams were making more money doing what they were doing than teams that were running 20th every week. Yep. Right. So, that rule exists because of that time period. If they recreated the charter agreement, which I guess they are right now, I do wonder what the future of that rule looks like in the next charter agreement.
I say it's gone. I just want to expand on that. I want to expand on those numbers too, because you think, okay, $6-10 million. That's a pretty big jump. The crazy part is, and this was the conundrum that Front Row was in forever. When Front Row was running on $10 million and finishing 32nd in points, to move to 30th in points or 28th in points was like an $8 million gap, or sometimes even higher, right? And so the reward for finishing 3 spots higher in points was only, negligible couple $100,000 maybe.
Mhm.
But the cost to do it was almost double what they were spending. And so it was like this weird conundrum. And I think right now, though, in the Cup Series, you have this weird, that is going away, and that the bottom of the Cup Series right now, 36th place, is a car that, I don't know, a couple years ago would have maybe been 30th or 28th, but that the gap to 36 used to be a couple, multiple millions. And now it's just all tightened up into that, from there to 15th is a doubling of cost and spend. But you also don't get that reward, and there's no guarantee now because there's so many cars that are spending that amount of money. So I don't know if that was a great way to explain it.
By the way, that's a very good thing.
It's a healthy thing. Yeah, it's a great thing. It's just that's why this rule doesn't make any sense right now, in my opinion. Anymore. So let's dive into our Championship 4 picks because that we had at the start of playoffs. I think this is kind of fun. So I had William Byron. So he's going to be there. I'm actually covering William Byron on NBC for all those wondering. So I will be in the 24s pit on Sunday. And I had Martin Truex Jr. He didn't make it. Denny Hamlin, who was my championship pick, he didn't make it. And I had Kyle Busch. He did not make it. So I only have one chance here. I didn't do well, Landon.
I have two shots at it. I've got William Byron and William Byron and Kyle Larson. I had Truex and Hamlin as well. So I was close to getting 3 out of the 4.
Look at you.
Josh has Byron, and that's it. So I'm like my chances here.
You also are apparently, helping those guys. So wow. You were like foreseeing the future or something there. Well done.
Yeah, I just had a good feel for the program and made sure that had them in there. So
you're like, if they were to bring me in, then these are definite championship locks. So
it's interesting though. I'm looking forward to seeing how they run this weekend. I feel like I have thoughts based on what I have felt. I have thoughts, so I feel like before the weekend starts, I should write them down and put them in an envelope, only to be opened until after the race.
Do that, and we'll do it on the pod. Do it after this, 100%. You have to do that. Also, we should say Josh has picked William Byron to win the championship, so he could win out entirely there. Let's move into Formula One. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, but if you're just hearing this now, we have a special episode I recorded earlier today with Will Buxton, the F1 TV host, obviously a part of Netflix Drive to Survive, was the reporter on Speed Channel and NBC Sports in Formula One. We dive into a debate about track limits, which was a real spirited discussion. He had some really strong opinions about drivers. We assessed some of them and some other big global topics in Formula One. So go check that out. It's on all our podcast platforms and on YouTube, of course. One thing that popped up this week, though, we're going to just dive into a couple little things in Formula One. Liam Lawson, who had that great debut for AlphaTauri this year when Daniel Ricciardo got hurt, is not in a full-time ride in 2024. He will be going back to the Super Formula series in Japan, which is a really cool series. And one day we should do a deep dive on that series because there's so many cool things that happen there. I've been a big fan of it for a long time. But Red Bull did say they want him on standby in 2024. So I believe nice. That young man, with the performance he had, he could find himself in Formula One in the next year or two, for sure. I thought he did great.
I feel like Formula One is so open about their standby driver culture and lineups and stuff. NASCAR is much more, less organized about it. Teams. I feel like NASCAR teams typically decide their standby drivers like in the moment, and sometimes based on who's available at that moment. Where in F1, it's like a whole pipeline and drivers on contract and salary on standby and stuff. So, I don't know. It is kind of an interesting dynamic there.
Actually, if you're
I totally
had this wrong, by the way.
You're just like, are you like putting X-Lax in their drink or what? If you really know, you're right there. You're like in the gym with Max Verstappen, and you're just like, oh man, here, catch this weight. Oops.
Oops, sorry. So I said it wrong. He will not be in Super Formula next year. My bad. He is the full-time reserve driver. That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry. I got all excited about Super Formula, and then I totally failed to say that he will not be going back there. So I agree with you. It's like the backup quarterback thing. Although the thing in backup quarterbacks in NFL is they make so much money. My brother always says it's probably the best position in all of sports because you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, make $1 million a year or whatever, $500,000 a year, and not get
No
hurt.
way. Do you know what those guys make now? You have backup quarterbacks that
Uh,
make almost probably $10 million a year, $7 to $10 million.
Are you serious?
I'm not kidding. Go look it up. It's unbelievable. It's the best. It's the best situation in sports is being a backup quarterback. Besides being a pro golfer, I'd say being a pro golfer would be pretty cool. So,
Oh man,
in the
just
paid
keep
department.
making assumptions.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's just make some blanket statements.
What's the internet, bro? What do you expect these days?
That's good.
There was a ton of rumors circulating around the internet the last couple of days where people love to use these. You won't believe what I just heard in the paddock deal. A lot of this centered around this rumor of Fernando Alonso replacing Sergio Perez at Red Bull. Sergio Perez possibly either retiring or going back to Aston Martin and just sort of a swap. It's not going to happen. Doesn't sound like it's happening, but I don't know. Rumors don't do it for me. I get people being so interested in them, but I see ones like this. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. Like, I don't get why people believe
Alonso
this,
would be a great Red Bull fit. He has this like aura about him.
Well, he's awesome. He's incredible.
I know, but he's got the like for a guy his age, he still has this like cool factor that I feel like fits Red Bull. And think about it for a second. I mean, Red Bull, I know that Red Bull obviously is a really young brand, but age-wise, the brand is, you know, I don't know. Do young people drink Red Bull or is it people our age?
It's probably our age. I still drink Red Bull.
So they have a young driver in their 20s, max, but why not reconnect with the original generation of Red Bull, which would be basically his age or a little bit younger. And by the way, he's still cool. He carries this like aura about him because he's Alonso. Makes perfect sense.
International man of mystery race car driver. You ever think about that? Like when he did the sports car stuff and Dakar, and it was just epic, and was just traveling the world doing that, and it just goes back to Formula One is awesome.
I mean, the other reason it makes sense to me is like it's not like Red Bull cares about their driver development pipeline at all. With how they've used AlphaTauri and well, I mean they've used it. Didn't we? Actually, we dove into that earlier this year.
Yeah, well, we and Will Buxton talks about that in the other episode I did, especially Alex Albon. You know, in terms of Red Bull being like, might have let that one get away too quick. I mean, the guy is immensely quick.
Wait, so I'm not wrong.
No, you are not wrong. They are so quick at Red Bull. Like the fact that Sergio Perez has lasted this long. I mean, they're not above making mid-season switches. That's how Max Verstappen got his chance and went and won when he replaced Danny Kvyat. You know, I mean, they've done this many times. And I mean, Pierre Gasly gets knocked down, then goes and wins. Right? It's like the fact that they've let this go on as long as they have with Sergio Perez. Something's going on there. So maybe they've had a change of heart. I don't know. You know what? If you're out there and you know what's going through Christian Horner's mind right now, reach out to us at the Money Lab, social media across all of them. Thank you. We're looking for a lot of reach out here. We're moving on to Formula One. We don't know the answer there, but we want to know if you know. Please let us know. Supercars in Australia. I just had to bring this up because I fell asleep watching this the other night, but I'm a big Supercars fan, and I just love to watch them, the highlights especially, or just like put those races on late at night, and I fall asleep to them because they're awesome. But nonetheless, Brody Kostecki and David Reynolds had an epic duel at the end of the race 25 at Surfers Paradise. David Reynolds snapped a 5-year winless streak when he won. But if you haven't watched this, please go check it out. You can do the highlights on YouTube. It's really easy from Supercars YouTube channel. But this race was just epic. It's everything we thought we were getting with the next gen car at road courses in NASCAR. And for some reason, we don't get it. And I can't figure. understand what the difference is, Landon.
What
But you can't get this kind of racing.
is their tire wider, or is their tire as wide as ours?
I think it's skinnier. I thought it was the same damn tire. So I was under the impression because Dunlop is their tire people, and Goodyear owns Dunlop, or Dunlop owns Goodyear, one of the two. I thought it was the same tire, but I don't think it is, and that could be the failure.
I think that's I was having this conversation earlier this week with some engineers, and we were talking about that aspect of the tire, and the conversation went to basically saying that maybe the contact patch is too wide, that the tire has this ability to dissipate heat too easily because it's so wide, and the car can just makes too much grip. It's hard to get past the tire and slide around.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Oh, I think there's a big I think the tire is just too much. There's just too much tire. Okay, so I'm looking it up right now. I'm just gonna do this live while we're here. Hold on. There's a vast the tires are vastly different between the Supercar and the NASCAR Cup car. So the NASCAR Cup cars use an 18 by 14 BBS wheel. The radial tires are 365 millimeters with a 35 ratio sidewall. Yeah, so Supercars use a far smaller tire. They use a 280 millimeter tire with a 40 ratio sidewall on 18-inch wheels. They have a smaller tire. They have a narrower tire. And the added sidewall allows for a more forgiving tire set through the corners. Yeah, it's all the tire. It's all the tire. It's what's ruined us.
So we need to go back. We need to go back the direction that we came from. Bigger sidewall, narrower tire, let the car lean into the tire more.
Yep, exactly. We need tires. With this discussion, if you came to the Money Lap podcast this week expecting anything other than tire discussion, you have been sorely disappointed.
Well, we have Q&A. Let's do our Q&A and then wrap this up. We've got two really good questions. One of them, I'm going to let you
hold on.
Answer.
To wrap up,
Break Bruner 21.
Let me wrap up something real quick. What
are you wrapping up?
Just a FYI for those that care. The championship battle in Supercars is going down to the final two races of the season at Adelaide. The Adelaide 500, one of the coolest street circuits in the world. Just as cool as Surface Paradise where they raced before. And basically, Brody Kostecki has a really large lead over Shane Van Gisbergen. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, that's coming up in a couple weeks. We can move on now.
Sorry. Okay. So we've done a year in Xfinity. Last year we had rear ends moving underneath. We had skew. We had all that stuff. This year NASCAR got rid of the skew. They locked down the rear end housing, so you didn't have the rear end housing moving underneath you through the motion of the car, through the travel. So Break Bruner on that topic wants to know, how did it change? How did it change the season? Were things closer on high-speed ovals? Was it a good change? What did you feel?
So I didn't get to drive these cars the last year on the large ovals like you did. So I know I have driven the cars that had tons of skew, even the COT era, and I've driven the ones that had a ton of movement. We still have movement because you can leave certain bolts loose and that sort of thing, and everyone does it, and so they do move, which was something I had to adjust to this year. I would say the biggest thing for me in terms of just, on the sim feeling the difference is you just can't carry the same level of throttle through the corner, and it doesn't quite have the ability to rotate through the center on throttle as it did with the skew pointed out. So, I think skew just adds a little bit of side force, which adds speed. That to me was the big difference. I don't personally think there was a different pecking order. Do I think the Joe Gibbs cars are perennially mostly the fastest cars / Stuart Haas? Yeah. And that's kind of been the case all year long. So at those tracks, I don't know if you have a different opinion.
I think it actually, we had some suspicions last year and felt like we saw things and in pictures and, there's always rumors and stuff. To me, the performance this year pretty much confirmed that I think JRM's advantage last year was in the rear end housings, was in the skew of the cars.
Yep. That's a good point.
Although Sam Mayer's been on it, but Sam Mayer, but we're talking about road courses and, it's not like intermediate tracks is where he's done it. So
yeah, they had, the Charlotte race last year where the 4 JRM cars were like lapping the field essentially over a long green flag run. I think that lended it to they had a pretty big advantage in the grip category, a little bit.
Yep.
So that is interesting. What's this next one? What's this next one we got?
Next one from Cole J 6976 wants to know if we find it odd that the 38 team would try bending the rules around something so obvious to even some of the public. I think he's referring to Zane Smith's truck at Homestead with the windshield deflection.
Yep.
We talked about. So, I think that, I mean, there's a couple different ways that I think you could look at that and say, first of all, yeah, I mean, maybe it is odd that they would do that and they just didn't think that it would get noticed. That's very possible. Sounds silly, but I think it's very possible that those teams, they get focused on the task at hand, which is, we come up with a strategy. NASCAR hasn't been inspecting the windshields. We're going to find a way to, fracture our braces or remove a pin or something, and it's going to deflect, and we're going to gain 50 pounds of downforce, and it's going to be great, and we're going to win, and nobody's going to know. And then they get out on the racetrack, and the first time their car's seen on TV in the middle of the race, they go, oh shit. That's very possible. I do think the second thing that is possible is, and I've seen this happen many times in my career, when you're dealing with movable things in the air and bracing, that you're trying to manipulate the strength of the brace. There's different ways to accomplish what that team was trying to do, and I don't know specifically how they did it, but it's very possible that whatever they were trying to do with the windshield brace, the real life of it did more than they were expecting, right? So maybe they just wanted to bend a little bit, but it ended up bending too much, or maybe they tried to remove something and it just completely collapsed. It's hard to tell once you put the car on the track and it's going 180 miles an hour what really is happening underneath there. So it's also very possible that whatever they were trying to do, they ended up getting more than they bargained for, and that's what got them caught.
Well said. I don't have anything to add to that. That was perfect.
Cool.
There's nothing more than that. Thank you guys for the questions. As always, if you want to get on the show, send us questions like this in the YouTube comments, on social media, wherever, and we will definitely, try to get them on the show. So I'm going to Phoenix this weekend. Landon, you mentioned you've been helping teams prep for Phoenix. Let's see if we can finish the year strong, and hopefully NASCAR has a scintillating 3 races to finish out with the 48 car winning the Saturday one, and holding the championship contenders off. That'd be wonderful.
Sounds good. Last race of the season. Make it happen.
We will. And before we go, I just want to say stay tuned to all our social medias over the next couple of days, especially into Monday, Tuesday next week, because as I said, we have something big to announce. And we just don't have it all together yet, but just stay with us. This is going to be big. It's going to last a lot of the off season. And it's going to be a lot of fun, and we need you all to be a part of it. So if you're listening to this podcast or part of our newsletter or on our social media, you're all going to be a part of it, and it's going to be awesome. So stay tuned. With that, that's the pod. Thanks for listening to the Money Lap. As always, check out themoneylap.com for the best 5 minutes in motorsports, or sometimes just the coolest stuff in motorsports, delivered directly to your inbox 3 times a week. Check us out on YouTube. We're growing fast over there. And of course, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We're all over the internet. We're spreading the word of how cool motorsports is. Check us out.